People to ask what's wrong, you can get away from the situation. But when it's um, these invisible abuses, it's hard. It's a mystery that needs to be unfolded, And a lot of people
Hmm.
go through life and have these experiences and never understand why.
Don't wanna get closer. If you're playing with my mind, it ain't fair. Don't wanna spend my energy.
Hello. I'd like to welcome JJ Jones to our show. Hello, JJ. How are you?
Hi, Jamie. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm very excited and very happy to have you with us. You have a lot to say. You wrote a new book, Quantum Hurting, where autoimmune disease and other spiritual illnesses lie in wait. You have a lot to say, when it comes to dealing with narcissistic abuse and areas in which really haven't been covered much at all. And so I'm very excited to speak with you about it, kind of learn a little bit about you. And this really does, I think, align very well with our foundation. The Narcissist Injury Care Foundation, at its core, it's really here to help educate, support, and guide and to advocate for survivors of narcissistic abuse. This is a much bigger problem than people think. So there is an opportunity to really delve in and help people. Meredith Malik, who's our founder, her mission has been to do that, to provide that level of support for people because she is a survivor. And, one of the things that I've seen is that there's a very big difference between people that have gone through this experience of abuse and people that haven't. We've all heard about narcissists and narcissistic abuse, but the people that haven't experienced really don't understand the depth of this trauma and this experience. And so I think that with your talk about what you have learned, what you have experienced, that'll go a long way in helping people as they go through this process. I think this conversation really is going to be a dialogue to open up about this level and cause of this abuse. So I'm really excited to jump in and get into it. But if we can start, I'd like to kind of gain an understanding of your story, your experience, and how you came to this level of awareness and understanding. I know you've done a lot of research. And so if you can kind of tell us a little bit about you so that we can kind of get a context of what you'll be talking about.
Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you so much. And thank you to Meredith for having me. This is a great opportunity. And you really hit the nail on the head. Everything you said is so true. And also, narcissism, that seems to be the word of the moment. Can't go anywhere on social media without, there being an expert on it or, somebody that having gone through it or something. But that N word, the narcissist word is out there everywhere. So you just really can't get away from it. For me, I grew up as a small town girl in Southern Arizona, and I had a great childhood. Was filled with love, support. I played sports. I was always on some type of field or some type of, sport court. I earned a scholarship for softball to the University of Arizona, where I was fortunate enough to earn All-American honors and was a member of the first national championship team. And then I graduated and got into real life, met somebody, and nothing like I had ever seen before. Knew it was different, knew he was something, didn't know what exactly. It's kind of how I put it. Not having the words back then or the vocabulary to properly explain. I started getting really sick to the point where I had to quit my job, take a long-term disability, and first I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and I knew it was something more than that. They had done blood work on me, and, a primary care physician had done blood work on me, and I tested borderline positive ANA for like an autoimmune disease. So he had sent me to one rheumatologist, and she said, well, you have hallmark symptoms of fibromyalgia, but you're not really testing for an autoimmune disease specifically. I was, waffling right on that borderline positive negative. So, 3 months had gone by after that, and I was getting worse, even with treatment, And so I went back to my primary care and said, everything's getting worse. Can we retest or, something different? So I retested my ANA, and it had come back 3 times higher than it was
Mm.
barely 3 months before. Yeah. So that was crazy. And so that was a big red flag. He sent me to a different rheumatologist, where I was able to find out through blood work, the specifics. I had, fibromyalgia, but I also had lupus, which is an interesting, a lot of people think those, I'm going to sidetrack here for a second. A lot of people think those are 2 separate illnesses. They're not. They're the same illness on the same spectrum. It'll start out as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, maybe even thyroid or something, but it will, if bad enough, if the conditions are bad enough, it will progress into, an autoimmune disease specifically. So they're not separate illnesses. They're the same illness, just on a spectrum. And I did put some really good information in there, citing my sources, studies that have proven that now. So I had just progressively gotten worse to the point where I was bedridden a lot. I developed the lupus, which for me, my symptoms were total body pain. I had joint pain, swelling in all of my joints, brain fog. I mean, there was so much that, it's a systemic illness. So it was hitting everything. I was getting weird infections like double ear infections or tonsillitis, kind of weird things that you would get, like in childhood. So, but I was not making the connection. But, the aha moment is when it's diagnosed as a systemic illness. So that explains why it's kind of hitting different systems and affecting different areas. But for years,
And
we tried to figure out, oh, go ahead.
yeah, and with everything that was happening to you, how was that overlaying with your experience that had caused this to happen?
Well, things had gotten more volatile, negatively progressed in my marriage. After the fact, I found out that this person was pretty high in narcissism and also psychopathy as well. He did have the past pattern behavior that goes along with those type of personality disorders. I didn't realize any of this at the time, of course. This was all after the fact. Some of the stuff I knew, after I had already been, romantically engaged, had spent a lot of time invested. So I was pretty well glued to this person by the time some of this came out, but the real bad stuff came out later. He had done some bad stuff, and there's always that pattern, choo, 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 choo. And when somebody has a personality disorder like that, they're not just being deviant some of the time. It's like every day, even in their, maybe not in their behaviors, but their like emotional, verbal, psychological abuse. It happens all the time, every day. Physical can happen all the time, every day. You see it. People would ask what's wrong. You can get away from the situation. But when it's these invisible abuses, it's hard. It's a mystery that needs to be unfolded, and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
go through life and have these experiences and never understand why. But back to my experiences, my rheumatologist and I, Western medicine tells us it's a virus, it's a bacteria. It could be something in our food. It could be an environmental toxin such as lead or mercury or cadmium or something like that. I've gone into so many of those different studies, and none of them are telling us that there's a true, cause and effect relationship there. You hear a lot of, there's positive correlations between variables, or, something along those lines, or, it can cause an illness that mimics lupus, things like that, like mercury, for example. But I never saw anything definitive in those studies. So it was always just a big mystery. Even to my rheumatologist, I didn't have any of the pre-existing factors. I didn't have, genetic predisposition for any of that. I didn't come, contact with any environmental toxins or anything like that.
Hmm.
Didn't, always thought that it was going to be something in my environment, something tangible. Why would I think otherwise? That's what we've always been taught. So after I got a divorce, after about 30 years, I mysteriously started healing. And I thought, oh, what's going on here? So I started reinvestigating. I went in a different avenue because I wasn't finding anything solid in Western science that fit my specific situation. So I was kind of hearing more about the quantum field, quantum physics, spirituality, and just on a hunch, I was really getting a pull to go in that direction. So I started researching that, and I'll be darned, I came across the answers. If you research and like Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory, and then you have Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, which is just a bestseller, and it's honestly my little Bible that my little spiritual medical Bible that I kind of refer to, and
Hmm.
a lot of important studies and research out there that are showing exactly how these invisible traumas, interpersonal trauma, verbal, psychological, emotional abuse is absolutely causing inflammation in the immune system. And if bad enough and if chronic enough, it will absolutely start kicking out these autoimmune diseases like lupus, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis specifically.
I
And
think
then,
that's one of the big um, dilemmas in people going through this experience is that one, you're getting the external abuse from someone, and oftentimes people think that it's their fault, and they're just trying to, they're scratching their head trying to understand what's going on, what is it that I'm doing, and then you start to get physical manifestations of it, and one is sick, consistently sick, and so that complicates a person's experience. And it is very difficult. We've received many emails from people talking about their experience, and that's one of the common things. And it does take a lot of strength for someone to begin to get a grasp on things and then gain an understanding of what's going on. And I think with your experience, it'll be really interesting to find out about what were the drivers. One, when we're talking about your getting sick and then healing yourself, the components behind it. And I think, in the title of your book, Quantum Hurting, we really start going into a different space in understanding what are the drivers, because oftentimes you go to a doctor and it's one of two things: you either talk about your problem and or you take a pill.
exactly.
And what we're talking about now is something much deeper than that and much more fundamental, I think, in terms of the causes of the hurting, as well as, on the flip side, what are the things that may drive healing. And also, you talk about, and it's part of the title, is from a spiritual perspective. What is the spiritual side of causing hurt to manifest in the body? And so, if you can talk to us about that a little bit, and if you want to, add more about your story, you're welcome to it. I think it does help people as they think through their experience and what they're going through. Maybe, giving a pathway or maybe a way of looking at the drivers of this hurt, because we all want to understand, what's causing my body and my mind to feel the way it's feeling, and why is it progressing. These are all things that a lot of people are asking themselves. So it'd be interesting to get your take on the driver from a quantum perspective. And maybe you can start off by explaining to people, because I think a lot of folks don't really understand this aspect of hurt at this basic fundamental level.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And that's the perfect question for this interview, this episode, because I think that's what most people are missing. It's certainly what I miss, again, because we are taught and indoctrinated by, certain, this Western medical, monster that we have over us. But the biggest thing is that when, somebody's being beaten down verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, whatever the case is, and it can even be passive. It could be, neglect, oppression, things like that. But at any rate, what it does is it causes, let me start over again. Okay. So the person, the victim, knows itself, knows very familiar with its spirit and its soul, and is considered to be a whole, like an organism, for lack of a better term. So when these imposing forces intrude on the spirit and soul that's very familiar with itself, it starts to internalize, especially if it's happening between like a child and an adult versus like a husband and a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend type of thing, because it's happening in the context of a developing brain. So the child really will internalize that and start their self-talk mimicking what they're hearing from the outside. I'm no good, I'm worthless, da, da, da. So what that does is now that familiar whole self is experiencing an intruder, some part of it, fragmented, pulling from the shamanic perspective, fragmented soul. So, depending on the severity, it could be, obliterated into many, many fragments or just a few. But the point is that the immune system and the organism as a whole it has these built-in defense mechanisms. So it is supposed to attack an intruder or an adversary. So when this unfamiliar part starts coming because of that abuse, the immune system doesn't recognize it and wants to attack it. So that's what's happening. I think that's what people are missing. The immune system's not confused at all in these situations. You hear about that. Well, why is the immune system confused and attacking itself? But it's because it's taking direct orders from the outside and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, if that makes sense. I think that's the big part people are missing and why they're not truly healing. They have to put those fragmented parts back together again. And there's nothing that, any of these hardcore medications, methotrexate can do, or, putting any type of nutrient or whatever, in your mouth or ingesting, nothing's going to fix that part. That's the spiritual element that needs to be treated in a very specific way.
Hmm. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. When we look at the whole idea of um, abuse, narcissistic abuse, it's very insidious. And as I mentioned before, the person victimized by it really doesn't know what's going on. And everything is behind the scenes. And I think the victim is probably 2, 3 steps behind the
Yeah,
abuser,
at least, in
right?
my book,
At
yeah,
least.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
way I put it
And
in my book,
so,
oh, go ahead.
yeah. And you start looking at the escalation of not only the physical deterioration of the body, but also mental. And in your book, you do talk about murder by proxy, and it makes so much sense. And people have explained things in different ways, but I think it's the same thing. And maybe if you can talk about this in terms of how it relates to the um, mindset and how it is also escalating in terms of the um, negative impact on the body.
Yeah, just to give you, I'll just use my case for an example. I was on top of the world when I met this person, and I was a national champion and getting out into the world, like the world was my oyster. I was all excited, and everything. So, just my personal experience, I can tell you that I was a very happy, um, affable person. I'm back to that now, absolutely. But that was my default. That was my default mood, and just how I was. And when you get somebody that's constantly criticizing you, and they do it in a very systematic way, like you were talking about earlier, you're at least 3 or 4 steps behind him. You hear that phrase, well, it takes two to tango. In these situations, I disagree 100%. Like I put in the book, your feet are stuck on top of theirs and they're swinging every which direction. They're telling you you're hearing hard rock. Well, you could swear you're hearing country. So it's that kind of thing. But you get beat down enough, you start internalizing that. Even as an adult, even as a confident adult, you start to internalize that. And, years go by and pretty soon I was not happy with myself. I hated myself. I was disgusted with myself. Everything that falling into that trap they want you to, because by this time you're in the discard phase, So first they put you up on the pedestal, and then, and they got what they want from you, their fuel, they'll start, degrading you, basically, defiling your soul is pretty much what it is, soul defilement. So when you hit that stage, you are very much in conflict with yourself. You don't like yourself. You're starting to, fall into Stockholm syndrome, your learned helplessness, and there's, things like that. And that really causes conflict, disharmony within the soul, the spirit, which I believe is that fragmentation taking place. And so when you get there, you just, like me, I didn't want to be around anymore. I thought I was a burden to everybody and just everything, and depression really lies to you and tells you stuff like that. But basically they take their negative energy and they put it on you and they want to beat you down. They want you to feel bad for yourself and stuff. But in a spiritual level, in a large picture, if you zoom out, what hit me in my epiphany was, oh my God, if, this is a basic age old, battle between good and evil. So if evil wanted to personify, in the third dimension, killing is messy. You get in trouble, you get sent to prison, blah, blah, blah. Why do that themselves when they can beat down their victim and have their own victim off themselves at their own hands, like I wanted to do? I experienced that exact scenario, and it is absolutely murder by proxy. And I don't think people realize that at all.
Yeah. And it is rough. I mean, we've heard of people going through very difficult situations, and at times we don't hear back from them. And,
Yeah,
you know,
that's so sad.
we wonder, what may have happened. And it's possible that, you know, the narcissist won in that case. And
Yeah,
that's why I think this
evil. And,
conversation is,
let's call it what it is. Evil won. We can talk narcissist and victim, but it's good against evil. And there's a whole lot of that going on right now. Evil will win as long as it has a place to hide, but we have to out it. We have to identify these murder by proxy situations. Yeah, I mean, my goal would be to get it somewhere in the court system, but good, good luck with that. So I'll
well,
start.
that's part of our mission, I think, because,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk about narcissism, but there's a big difference between that and really educating oneself on truly what is, how to mitigate it personally to be able to wake up from it. And the other thing from our perspective is in trying to bring change into the system. And it is a long term task, a long term job, but it does start with bringing awareness to the collective. And this is part of the conversation that we're having now, is to help people understand, what are the drivers that lead people to get to a very difficult physical situation and mental. And very importantly, what are the ingredients, or what are the things that can bring that aha moment in awareness to help an individual turn things around? Because really, that's from a victim standpoint, this is the big opportunity. One is understanding what's happening, and two, using that understanding to begin to heal. And you make a strong connection between trauma, abuse, and the development of autoimmune diseases. Can you explain kind of what those mechanisms are that drive that?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I describe it, the best, without being a licensed doctor, expert, or anything, just a person that went through it and did a lot of research. For me, the process from beginning to end is it starts in the quantum field. Just like quantum healing, they're using those positive energies and frequencies to heal. So, the opposite, quantum hurting, the negative aspects. Whether it's from a person specifically or maybe a situation or place that has bad memories or something like that. Um, but it enters the biofield or the person's aura. Either one. I think it's called the electromagnetic field as well. I see in some of my research. And, if a person knows what to do and they're aware of it and they can identify it, they can actually block, or just kind of shield, redirect that negative energy. But for the average Joe like myself and, most people, we don't know how to actively identify and have the tools and strategies to block it or redirect it, kind of reflect it rather. So we just absorb it all. And through the process of interoception, it makes the corresponding chemical changes in the bodies, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the amygdala is on high alert, the limbic systems is, high alert and all those symptoms that go with it. And obviously it's going to create pro-inflammatory cytokines in the immune system. And if, again, when that's bad or severe or chronic enough, it will start turning into these illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, thyroid, people thinking, well, I'm allergic to gluten and stuff. Well, if you trace it back to the starting point, it's a sensitivity that's coming from the energy, these negative energies that invade us. So that's basically how it happens. Kind of an oversimplified process. It gets into more detail in the book, but just a basic overview where to kind of give people a rough idea of the concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. This is really interesting to me because I look at things also in terms of energy. You can feel someone's energy, and you can go into a room, and oftentimes you get a feeling either good or indifferent or not that good.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all too often we don't listen to our body, we don't listen to our intuition, what it's telling us.
Not at all.
And I think from what you're talking about in terms of getting down to a quantum aspect of understanding, it is in picking up, what you're feeling and kind of making sense of it. Because all too often, as I mentioned, one doesn't really know what's going on. They're just so bombarded by the verbal abuse and then not feeling well. I think it's the opportunity to kind of step back a little bit to try to understand it. And it is very difficult to do. It's understandable, because one's living in that very harsh environment.
It is. And, they do that by design and the gaslighting, and then, all the actual behavioral and physical things that they're doing. You don't know where they're coming or going, honestly. Like me, I was sick. I was on some medication that made, things worse. And as far as, what's going on, what's he doing? It's tough. They kind of, you're isolated at that point. I was pretty much isolated and, you rely on them for all your information because early on you learn to trust them. And mine was very intelligent, which is a correlation with psychopathy as well, is a pretty darn smart. In fact, they're scary smart, street smart. And to me, that might be the smartest of the smarts of them all. What
Huh?
I've seen. Yeah. So there's a lot there that goes on, but yeah, I mean, they do that by design and they keep you so busy that you don't have time to go inward and reflect like, hey, what's going on, or get some perspective because you're in it, going in it, 100 miles an hour. And that's how they live their lives. They're low on dopamine. So anytime they get bored, which is all the time, they have to create drama and they'll sit back and just watch it play out with a little gleam in their eyes. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I think back and I just can't believe, I think, well, no wonder I was so sick. My goodness.
Yeah, yeah, and it's in that level of awareness. And
Yeah,
you mentioned about you're living in it, and it's hard when you're in it because all you're doing
absolutely.
basically is just receiving
Absolutely.
that bombardment, verbal and physical manifestation of it.
Hmm.
And the days go by, the weeks go by, the years go by, and it just seems to get worse. And one of the things that we see is that by design, a narcissist will also cut away that support system that an individual had before, whether it's family or friends. And, that's part of that control mechanism that they utilize to keep their food source in line.
One thing I would like to point out is, you know, I think a lot of people think they go for very weak, vulnerable victims. That's not always the case. They see something nice or whatever, and they want a part of it. I was not weak. I was not meek. I was, pretty confident, pretty outspoken, spoke my mind. And I think that's why I got so sick is because I would always stand up to him. And I don't think he was used to that. But he was, 7, 8 years older than me. He was very smart. Plus he did this for a living. It's kind of his livelihood is just to kind of try and screw you into the ground, so to speak. And he was really good at that. So I didn't stand a chance. But I think just standing up to him so much, and getting between him and the kids and, having to break up stuff. I think physically that had a lot to do with it too. So it's not just, their active berating of you or whatever the case might be. It's the environment that you're sucked into. I call it a vortex of negativity because that's honestly the best way that I could describe it. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and it complicates things when there's children involved.
No.
That
Yeah.
dynamic is just that much more complex, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the big reasons victims stay, it's a big question. Why do victims stay? I definitely address that in my book, but, being that buffer between the kids is pretty vitally important to me. So that's one of the reasons that I stayed.
Hmm. Yeah, and for our listeners thinking through this, what we're trying to do, and I think you break it down from your research, you get into quite a bit, but also you bring it up in terms of the basic fundamentals of what drives disease to come into the body. You also talk a little bit about the shamanic perspective of this. And I think this really gets to the core, the very fundamental to where everyone can understand this. Can you kind of explain to us how a shaman would look at illness? How do they explain it
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah,
its
absolutely. In
manifestation?
reference specifically to these long-term chronic illnesses like these autoimmune diseases, they do believe in terms of the body is, one, the way they describe it is one with the earth and nature and everything, which is just a different way of saying it's one with the universe. We're all one with the universe. So their understanding is that you're going to have like your body's going to be kind of damp, suffering from like a damp illness or like a warm illness. Damp illnesses would be like AIDS, where the immune system's really slow, and you know, um, or AIDS, where it's different. It's a different illness, but the warm is going to be like allergies, where the immune system's really super hyper, and you see like eczema, hives on the lower end of the spectrum, and that's where you would see, chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, and then you get higher up on the allergy, where the body's allergic to itself. That's where you're going to see the autoimmune diseases, but they believed that these symptoms you're going to start seeing of soul fragmentation is going to be the first one is disharmony, and that's where your values and perhaps your outward behaviors do not align with your original true values and your core values, probably because somebody's trying to change you in some ways for the worse, to align better with their values. And and then when you get farther into illness, there is, well, the last one's going to be soul loss. That, so it's,
Hmm.
what was it, dishonesty? I think fear was the second one. See, this is where I wish I was able to print my stuff out. Anyway, the last one, the most important one is soul loss. I discussed in the book, but that's really where your soul's been obliterated. It's been murdered. It may be at the point of no return, but they do believe in soul retrieval. They have their certain processes and healing methods that they do, but it's energetic. It's from this invisible, esoteric world that we all live in, that we're immersed in. We're just not aware of because we can't see it.
Hmm.
But shamanic perspective, in my opinion, they absolutely have it down. They understand.
Right. And I think this is universal with shaman all over the world. I mean, it's basically the same thing, and it's a fundamental from a human spirit perspective. And so, with all this said, how would you, or what would you recommend for people to do to try to help understand, one, where they are energetically, um, to kind of get that grounding on what is happening to them?
So I would say the biggest thing, is you got to be able to be mindful and check in with yourself. Otherwise, it's just going to pass you by. You don't know what the heck's going on. You're just living in the moment with no reflection or anything. So you have to be able to be mindful, check in with yourself. You have to be able, see, if you kind of peel away all the layers and just kind of try to not oversimplify, but to simplify it, is these victims are suffering from self-directed anger and disgust and whatever you'd like to add to that. That's basically what it boils down to. So we have to we have to we have to reverse that. You have to apologize and forgive yourself, probably for a lot of things that you have no business feeling guilty for, because again, it's all very systematic how that all goes down. So, you're in a game, but there's only one player, and that's that person, and you don't even know you're playing in a game. You know what I mean? Um, there's that. And, oh gosh, I just forgot what I think again. What was the question again? Prompt me again, please.
Yeah, in terms of from a shamanic perspective, how what are the things, and not even shamanic perspective, but from everything that has been talked about, how does one come to a level of awareness of where they are mentally and physically to be able to get a kind of a point in time understanding of themselves, because that's the only way that change can come, is if we understand kind of where we generally are,
Yeah.
to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
And that's kind
Well,
of the turning point. I think that is so
yeah.
important for people to learn or pick up.
Yeah, and sadly, when they're at the point of discovery, there's already a lot of physical and chemical damage that's been done. Ongoing
Right.
chronic. The cortisol is just ramping up everything and exhausting everything. So, when you get to that point, even for mind people that are not mindful, they're going to get to a point where they realize like, oh, something's going on. So it's at that point where they're already, I stay like in probably the third or fourth stage of a 6-stage process, where it goes from the quantum field to autoimmune disease. So they're already at a critical level. It's, you can still, there's still time to heal, but there's a lot of, it would be a massive undertaking. Like I said, earlier, you have to be able to forgive and apologize yourself, forgive yourself for things. Maybe the choice you chose was not the best. You didn't have good choices to choose from to begin with. So you just have a lot of forgiving. You have to release that self anger, negativity, and all that stuff, because that's what's causing inflammation in the immune system. Anger. In the book, there's a study that I put in there about how an interpersonal argument, specifically, greatly increases, almost like a cytokine storm of interleukin-6. So it's interesting what that can do to the body. But when you're at that stage, it's crucial because at that point, not only is your body, that mind body starting to go, but socially, you're tired, you have to cancel outings and things. Maybe you're spending more time with the doctor, your income is going to be affected, family time, everything gets affected. So when you're at that point, you're at a crucial point where you really need to take strong and swift action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you do in your book touch a little bit on Eastern medicine and the mind body practices and therapies. Living in the Western world, I know we do have an increasing amount of Eastern medicine practices and all. But you did touch on mindfulness. What are some of the things that individuals can do to kind of get a grasp on their situation? Because people are drowning mentally and with their body hurting as it does. So how can one make that turning point? Mindfulness is a great
Yeah,
place
absolutely.
to
Yeah, you
start,
know
of
what?
course.
During my research, I was researching mindfulness. Honestly, it's like it's one of the holy grails, or it should be considered because once you have mindfulness, you can really have control of your inner self, and boy, you're really winning at life when you get to that point, So it's it's incredibly useful. But mindfulness is a tool really you use to get into the limbic system, to get that therapy, the bottom up therapy, we call it in that field. But just yoga, things that relax the vagus nerve. It is ramped up, and if you know anything about Dr. Bessel van der Kolk in his book, if done any reading, you'll know that the vagus nerve, that internal system, doesn't have a clock. Like, it doesn't realize the trauma's over and that it can relax and that it's safe. So what yoga does is it, holding those yoga poses, is it teaches and it conditions that system to understand that the trauma's over. I'm in a safe place. I can relax. My muscles can relax. Gut can go back to normal, the flora and the chemicals and everything. And the gut, such a complicated system, but it really brings you back to homeostasis and just trying to find inner harmony and peace and live in a way outwardly that reflects your true inner belief systems. And that's a huge thing. Get away from the offending source, obviously. um Almost like going into like a respite care kind of situation, where you have to remove yourself and put your place in an environment that's conducive to healing. First and foremost, surround yourself with people that you trust, with just simple things, as you can trust them to do a simple task for you, and you don't have to feel like that walking on eggshells, like you do with the other person, the perpetrator. But just
Hmm.
being in an environment that's conducive to healing, that's tremendous. Walking, go out on walks, walk in nature, do grounding, just some light exercise. Then, cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR, things like that. But
Hmm.
definitely nothing where, they're going to be injecting methotrexate into your veins or anything like that.
Right, right. And I think, what you were talking about, the walks and all, that's kind of a way of meditating.
Absolutely.
And there are different ways of doing it. I meditated for years, and what that helped me to do is really go inward and be able to control myself and understand that things start from within. It's my decision on how I react to things. And it's, I know, very difficult when someone is in a abusive situation, um, because there's so much static in in their field, that they need to be able to, one, get a grasp of themselves. And, you mentioned about self-care and the meditation, mindfulness aspect of it. And that's a big part of kind of gaining sovereignty over one's life.
Yeah,
and
that
I think that's
agency that we need to get
where it
back.
starts. Yeah, absolutely.
Self-care is tremendous. Absolutely. It goes with self-love, self-forgiveness,
Hmm.
self-acceptance, which is a precursor to love. So yeah, it's all
Yeah.
tremendously important. Absolutely. Not just, talking about it.
Yeah, and I know people also look for help through counselors and all, and that's really good. One thing that we understand is that it really is important for someone that is suffering through this type of abuse is that a therapist should have experience with NPD. They need to understand the signs of an individual that is suffering through trauma, through that specific type of trauma.
Yeah.
All too often, we have uncovered from um, hearing from people is that that is sometimes left out, and it does more a disservice to an individual than not. So it really is important, and it behooves the individual to do their homework and to find the right type of therapist that can help, um, you know, when they're dealing with uh, a narcissist.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because by the time they're in a doctor's office, they're already experiencing the physical symptoms, and talk therapy. If you're already in, some degree of fight or flight, that may not work for you straight away in the beginning. Maybe something you want to do later after you've done that bottom up type therapy to calm everything down. So you can get those frontal lobes, back online, because when you're in that state, you can't think properly. Your concentration's not good. So you got to calm the body down to calm that mind down to get it to a place where, you can meditate or be mindful, at least think, and not feel like you have brain fog or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm. So as we're wrapping up, you've helped us understand a little bit about the fundamentals of what this quantum hurting, how it comes about, some of those basic fundamentals that drive that. We looked at maybe where can we find that turning point to where one can understand where they are and begin to make a shift towards understanding and recovery. So, what would you say are what's the main message that you would want to give people as they, from your book and from your research that you've gone through so extensively?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with my overall goal is to, raise a collective frequency vibration of as many people as I can so they have the opportunity to heal like I was um, you know, so grateful for healing. I was able to heal. It's just unbelievable. I wake up every morning. I'm like, wow, wow. So I want people to have those wow experiences as well. There's just so much misinformation out there. My goal with the book is to show people that, it's that esoteric invisible field where, I'm going to say most of these autoimmune diseases are coming from, and the illnesses that are, a little bit lower on the spectrum, like I said, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and show people that it's that component, that it's that spiritual component that everybody's missing. And it's the part where your soul gets fragmented because it is internalizing, all that negativity. And then part of it becomes unfamiliar with this new part and, becomes an adversary. It doesn't know, it's suspicious of, and it's supposed to attack those things. So that's what it does. It takes orders from the external environment and it goes into attacking whatever, for me, I think that genetics tells you what kind of bullet to use. They say genetics pulls a trigger. Well, I believe there's some genetic predisposition. There's some coming out, some new information coming out, but so much it's because it was in the environment in the first place. That's how it gets into the genetics through the process of epigenetics. So I think that's something people don't understand either, is that the reason it's in your genes is because it was first in your ancestors, wherever, their immediate environment. But, I think they're missing that. And just the part about, getting the soul put back together, and that process is self-forgiveness, self-love, self-care, and all the things we just previously discussed. Um, and just educate people and let them know why they're actually getting hit with all these autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, that's so important, and thank you for that. And hopefully, that'll help people kind of understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, and maybe give folks some guidance on to how to process it and know that it's not their fault.
Exactly.
You know.
And, I'm glad you just mentioned that because, boy, are we taught to blame ourselves. We're taught to look first to ourselves in any problem, issue, or whatever. And, it was a big thing for me when I got out of the relationship is I would apologize for everything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And people, would tell me, why are you apologizing? You don't need to apologize, So, yeah, that happens. Your self-talk becomes their self-talk, and you got to get it back to where it's your self-talk again. There's a big difference
Mm-hmm.
between what you're telling yourself and what they're telling you.
Mm-hmm. Well, JJ Jones, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning about you and your book. How can people find your book and learn more about you?
Well, you can go to my personal website, quantumherding.com. It is also iamthestormwarrior.com. So 2 names, same website. You can buy the book there. There's some personal information about me there. In fact, I have a couple of Barnes and Noble book signings tomorrow. That information's on there. And then it's my book's also like on Amazon.com and Barnes and Noble and all different websites. But yeah, I'll be around trying to promote. Hopefully, you'll see more of me.
Yeah, well,
And people need to know
great,
they can
great.
heal from these diseases. I mean, look at me. I'm healthy. I'm thriving. I'm working. I have a great career. Coming off a long-term disability. People need to know that there can be success stories and you can absolutely heal and thrive after autoimmune disease and specifically narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I think for our viewers, just know that you may feel isolated, you may feel alone. You're not. You do have um, us to help you. And if you are feeling bad and need help, talk to a friend if you have one available. And I know that in many cases, that has been dismantled by design. So try to talk to a friend. If you feel that you are in danger, call an abuse hotline that may be able to help you talk through things. And there's also shelters that may be available so that you can get out of your situation. If it is life threatening, you also have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We'll have the number in the description below, but call them and they can help you.
Yeah, that's a
You
great
are
resource.
worth it. You are strong. You're beautiful. And remember that. Know that you are special. We do have
Absolutely.
resources on our website, foolednomore.org, where you can go and find what I had mentioned about shelters and hotlines. And if you are getting out of a situation, we do have resources and tips on how to maneuver through the legal system. So look for those things. And if you like the content that we've had, like, follow, and share. We're on Facebook as well. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you again, JJ Jones. And thank you all for watching. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
You have a
Jamie,
great
and
day.
thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.